Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Talk Whiskey. I'm Nick, here with you as always, and thanks for tuning in for episode number 76. And because tomorrow is St. Paddy's Day, we are going to do a little bit of a twist. Now, normally I would bring out a new Irish whiskey that I hadn't reviewed yet, but of all the Irish whiskeys that I own, except for a Bushmills 21, which I didn't really feel like reviewing for this week's episode, I decided I would do something a little bit different. And it's got a little bit of local flair as well to it, since I'm here in Philadelphia. So we've got the Brothership Irish American whiskey. Now I know you might start seeing some of these whiskeys coming out that seem a little bit more of a marketing ploy than anything substantial or new, rather, based in fact or something, that's not hidden behind a veil of secrecy. So, the one thing, I had to go looking about for this at my local liquor store because it said on their website that they had it, but it couldn't be found anywhere. So, we've got the Brothership Irish American whiskey. It's aged 10 years, but when you look at the bottle, there's not really much to be taken away from it. You've got the red, white, and blue stars above the whiskey over there, and then you've got the green, white, and orange with the Irish flag underneath. And on the back, all that you see is that it's bottled by Millstone Spirits Group, LLC in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But other than that, it gives a brief little excerpt about its founders and their ties, their Irish-American history, and all that sort of thing. And there was actually a little bit of, there was a, the paper cap that's usually on top of whiskeys, the seal there for the cork. But once you unearth that, you can see on the cork itself that this is from the Connacht Whiskey Company, which has a distillery on the west coast, the west side of Ireland, rather. And so what we have here is a partnership between the New Liberty Distillery, which is based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the Connacht Whiskey Company. Both are sort of brother and sister companies owned by another bigger, not corporation, but just a larger parent company. So what we have here is 10-year single pot still Irish whiskey that's been sourced from somewhere, probably Milton, knowing some of the founders' history and their CV, rather. They probably have gotten secured some stock from there in terms of a 10-year single pot still. It's kind of only a few places you could possibly get that without aging it yourself at this point. So I will say that they are aging their own spirit right now, and they want to bring that single pot still Irish whiskey from an Irish company back to the country, which I think is really cool. So obviously they have to lay down the stocks, and this isn't 10-year single pot still Irish whiskey from them yet, but they're maturing their own, and they're making single pot still right now and laying it down to age over the years, which I think is really cool, because when you think about all of the companies, all of the distilleries in Ireland, and what companies are producing bottles where they actually get their whiskey, you realize that you've got what is now like this sort of a sphere of Irish whiskey companies actually getting their sources from like 3 places. So you've got Teeling Whiskey Company also laying down their own single pot still Irish whiskey, as well as Tullamore, which I've heard about, but other than that, I don't know of too many other distilleries or companies in Ireland that are, or have come out and said that they're looking to do that. So anyway, the proportions in this, I didn't say earlier, but this is a 45% ABV, so it's nice to get a little bit of a bump up. And the proportions of Irish whiskey to American whiskey are 52% Irish whiskey to 48% American whiskey. Now, there's absolutely no trace that I can find of where that American whiskey is coming from, but my guess is that it's probably MGP or something like that, But anyway, they don't divulge all of that information, but it's nice enough to know that it is sort of a conglomeration between Irish and American whiskey. It's the same thing that other people are trying to do, but just with a little bit more transparency. We're not getting all the details, but an age statement and a little bit of background is definitely A+. So their master distiller, Robert Cassell, is a native of Philly. And then they have their head distiller, John Park, who I believe also lives in Philly. And he worked at Guinness Diageo for 8 years or something like that. So, there's a possibility that, there's some sort of connection there with, getting the single pot still whiskey out of there. You never know how closely they're working with each other, but, Pernod Ricard and Diageo may be nice to each other, or we should know. So, the first thing that I noticed when I cracked this puppy open is the color on this thing. For 10 years old, I don't know what they're aging their whiskey in. Now again, this is both bottled and blended in Philadelphia over here, so they're getting that shipped over here. But if you look at it, it's got a really pale gold color to it, really pale. And that's really interesting because I would have thought that at 10 years or at just being sort of this wasn't even on the shelves. They had it, but this wasn't on the shelves. They had to go into their back room and get it, even though they had about 18 bottles of that. So, I don't know, I think they could knock one of those Crown Royal knockoff or flavored crap out there in place of something like this. But, I'm just being a smartass. So, anyway, not a lot out there. I would have thought, that this would have a little bit of coloring in it, though I'm not sure exactly how that would work, being, if they distilled the American whiskey or, sourced it, and the intent was to stay inside the U.S., there wouldn't be any caramel coloring added to it. I believe the rules are a little bit different if it's made in the U.S. and then it's being exported to another country, that it can have coloring in it. And if it's from Ireland, Scotland, that sort of thing, and they ship it here, it can have caramel coloring in it. So it gets a little bit hazy with how that's going. My guess is that this can't have any coloring in it. I'm going to say because it was bottled and blended here with obviously American whiskey in it. So my guess is that there is no color in it, and by the looks of it, it really does not look like there is any at all. And if they were trying to perpetuate this ideal that it had an aged color to it, like a lot of companies do, I don't think they would have put it in the the tinted green bottle. So all these things are all great things going for it, and this is sort of the exciting aspect of where our future is headed as enthusiasts and partakers in the whiskey industry. So let's get into the nose on it. Now, interestingly enough, this comes off right out of the get-go as like a nice Irish single malt. So, and also, I'm not getting the same pot still character that I get with Redbreast, but if you were to drop out Redbreast's sort of nutty, robust, earthy notes, I think you'd get a nose similar to what this is. So it's coming off right away. It's just a strong, smooth vanilla, the malty notes, biscuity, definitely a little bit of honey. Really fragrant, really fruity. I'm getting some ripe apples, almost like Granny Smith apples that got the tart note to it. Definitely a hint of cinnamon in there. So let's go in for the taste. as it first comes in, you're getting a strong vanilla note that just sort of coats the center of the tongue and goes down. But then it expands out from there, and I'm getting those malted barley notes, but I'm also getting some rich wood, some oaky notes to it, a little bit of nutmeg, cinnamon coming from the bourbon barrels and ex-bourbon. Really interesting. It's interesting that in the nose, it's so Irish whiskey forward. But then when it gets into the taste, really compounded with the single pot still and the American whiskey coming together in a way that, at least for the second taste that I got, was those really fragrant, ripe, fruity notes turned into something more of a dark, sherry fruit note, which is really kind of cool. And it leaves this really interesting, tangy, sweet, nectarine finish, which is kind of weird. Sort of like something is clashing there. It's not bad, but it's interesting. You don't expect it. I'd be interested to know what the mash bill is of the American whiskey that they have in this. So notice they didn't. They could have easily said bourbon, and that would have, limited stuff down a little bit more as to what it was. But the fact that it's American whiskey means it could be anything. So, this could be a high rye, which would be really interesting because it does have those fruity notes, and I'm wondering if that is transforming it into that almost redbreast-like sherry note. It's really interesting how those play together. And again, it all starts as like this journey. When you first get it, it's that vanilla, and then you get sort of the sweetness, the oak, the wood, and you get a little bit of pepperiness too that comes into it. Kind of coats the outside of the mouth, but then it all sort of comes in together like this whirlpool of like dark sherry notes, sort of dried nuts, thinking like cherries. Definitely raisin, cranberry. Definitely still having that strong vanilla undertones. And in terms of mouthfeel, you are getting something that's similar to a single pot still Irish whiskey. I can't quite pin it down, but it seems like a lighter single pot still, almost like a green spot. It's not so heavy. It's not like a Powers John's Lane where you have these really earthy, tobacco-y, smoky, really earthy, robust notes to it. But this is skirting more towards the lightly textural, almost maple syrup-esque in nature. And that's a really good combination, I think, for the way they've created this flavor profile with this dark sherry note, but then having the cinnamon and vanilla and the oak influence from the American whiskey. Yeah, I can see this company having a really bright future. And I love the collaboration that they thought on this. Talk a lot about innovation these days, and that's sort of been my critique really the past couple weeks on innovation and what that means in the Irish whiskey market in particular, because there's just so many whiskeys, especially around St. Patrick's Day, coming out. People want to get their product out there, and it just, you gotta wonder how many people can actually see through the BS, and how many people are just sort of just blowing over their heads because they're new to it. They're just getting into it. They're looking to get something that is just really cheap and has a lot of those marketing terms that these companies are now pitching to people, that they're like party whiskeys and that sort of thing. It's like what happened in the past few years with Paddy's, and they broke that off and they turned that marketing campaign into, it was the the party Irish whiskey to go towards, and then they had the, what was it, the Devil's Apple or something like that, some other flavored version of that. And then with Bushmills Red Bush, and changing the label so that it's nice bright red, keeping the same bottle type, but then saying matured exclusively in ex-bourbon casks. And then they talk about it, the master distiller Colin E, who's like, this is harkening off of the innovation that has propelled Bushmills throughout its history over the centuries. And it's just like, you already got the marketing ploy with the 1608 and the oldest Irish distillery, all that BS. They lost their records in the 1940s or 50s anyway, so it's not like they could back up any of those claims if they wanted to. But it's just like, how much different? It's like, you've got a lower price point. Yeah, the bottle is nice and shiny. You've got all these marketing terms that are, marketing towards the millennial crowd and what I call the broke crowd, that's just looking for something cheap. They go, let's try, an Irish whiskey, and you think Jameson. Well, Bushmills wants to get on it, and they want to, who can have the boldest label, really, for the lowest price. And obviously, the way marketing works in advertisement, when you go into the store, if you put that bottle in the right place, the right price on it, and it looks good, you're going to snatch that up in high quantity. So, unless we get the word out that things like that are just BS, and depending on what kind of person you are in the market, you're looking to see innovation that's like this, where it's like mixing Irish whiskey and American whiskey. Yes, pursue that. Oh, and by the way, we're producing single pot still Irish whiskey, which hasn't been done by an Irish company itself, other than Teeling, in like ages. So it's all owned by these, huge drinks, beverages, conglomerates. Pernod Ricard, Diageo, Bushmills, Casa Cuervo, and all these different brands. I like William Grant and Sons, so I'm not going to throw them under the bus, but even that's, not Irish. So it's just all these things. Anyway, in summation, let's give a little score here, even though it's a little bit tough because it's not like you have a bunch of Irish American whiskeys to compare it to. But I will give it a score of 92 out of 100. I'm looking forward to seeing maybe some other companies will get on bandwagon and say, yeah, people will actually buy this stuff. And I know this is only in limited distribution right now, especially here in the States. It just happened that Pennsylvania was one of the states that got this because, they're blending and bottling less than a mile from me. So that probably helps. And it probably helps that one of the founders was a former chairman on the PLCB, which is the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. So that probably helps too. And they've got a lot of people together in that company, and kind of whiskey company that are really, have really good histories in the industry and all that sort of thing. So I wish them the best. And so with that, I hope you have a great St. Patrick's Day tomorrow. Let me know what you're drinking. If you have anything special, I'll probably be hitting up some of the single pot stills, because that's always my favorite to go to. Probably the Redbreast 12 cask strength I might knock at for a little while, and then I'll probably switch to Powers Jones Lane. Just really love that heavy distillate, the single pot still. So whatever you're drinking, drink responsibly, and we'll see you next time.